Good evening. The San Dimas City Council meeting will come to order. Please rise. Rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This evening we're going to have a recognition of Life Pacific University's centennial year, and we'll ask staff of Life Pacific if they'd like to make a presentation, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, distinguished council members, staff. Thank you for allowing us to come here and make our presentation. We truly appreciate it. My name is Josh Ortega. I represent staff and faculty from Life Pacific University. We are here to make a proclamation, as you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, about our centennial celebration, which actually just started here on January 1st, celebrating 100 years of our institution and our denomination for the Foursquare denomination. And what I would like to do is invite up our president, Dr. Angie Ritchie, who's going to be making a PowerPoint presentation to share with you some information we have coming up in the next few months.
Thank you. Dr. Ritchie.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Council, and community members, those that are watching online via live stream as well. I'm so honored to be here, and I'm honored to be a part of this city. For 33 years, Life Pacific has been on the corner of Lone Hill and Covina Boulevard. I want to share a little bit about Life Pacific University. I'm not sure if we have the slides, and if not, that is fine. I think something we have to recognize is that LPU wants to make a difference. The world is changing faster than we can keep up. Schools are now the primary center of worldview formation. The mental health crisis is an all-time high. Americans are more divided than ever, gridlocked over social issues, race, gender, and the economy. Only 4% of Gen Z hold a biblical worldview. And Pew reports that by 2070, only half of the U.S. will be Christian. Universities prepare students. Life Pacific prepares students to serve, lead with character and ethics, engage the virtues, and develop skills for their life calling and purpose. Couple more slides ahead if we want to. The world needs strong leaders to influence all sectors of society, the church, the workplace, and the world. And one of the questions that Life is asking right now is how do... Yep. I can do it myself? Okay. Make sure it's on. Oh, you guys, great, thank you. One of the questions several questions we asked is, how is LPU's mission serving the students? How are we serving the market? How are we serving solving problems? How are we serving also the city of San Dimas? And the good news is, if you look at this next slide, we are 5th in social mobility in the West. We are nationally ranked. That means that students that enter our university at a socioeconomic status graduate at a higher socioeconomic status, lifting themselves, their families, and communities. We're also rated 10 best in the West for regional colleges and the 11th best value in the West. So that's very good news. A little overview about who we are. We equip more leaders with these degrees. Biblical studies, human development psychology is our largest, ministry, communications, administration, business administration, worship, arts, and media. And then we have online and graduate programs for lifelong adult learners in leadership, management, theological studies, leadership Spanish, and counseling. Counseling being our largest program. We are also excited that we are launching several new graduate programs this summer: Masters of Arts in Counseling, Masters of Divinity, an MBA, which is a 4+1. Those that graduate with 4 years at LPU can take 1 more year to get their MBA. We also have a Spanish bridge and then an academic purpose program. But I want to show you a little bit about what our value is. 95% of our graduates have job placement. And again, 66% of our students pursue graduate education. And again, 10 best value in economic diversity in the West. But here's just some of the organizations where our students serve in internships, and many actually within the city. We serve in local churches, but also nonprofits and for-profit businesses. Many of our students, we just did a LinkedIn Google search, and or a LinkedIn search, and this is where many of our students have landed. Not only in nonprofit, but we have places like Amazon, Boeing, Goldman Sachs. We're very proud. You would never know that a small little school can honestly have big impact. Some of our graduate schools where students attend are listed here, and we are really excited for the future. As we head into our 100th years, we're launching new programs. We just got a $1.5 million grant. We're working on several others to lift what we do to add more value. And as we look to the future, we're looking at this focus, the future church. What will it look like? We're looking at leader health, mental health, emotional health, and technology and creative arts. And as we head into our 100th year, you are all invited in the entire San Dimas community to a ribbon cutting ceremony on Wednesday, January 18th from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. in our city, located at our university on Covina Boulevard. We'd love for everyone to come and join in. It's going to be a wonderful celebration, and Honorable Mayor, we're so excited that you're going to be there with us. We're also going to have a worship experience in February that you're also invited to, and we just want to make sure that not only are we serving our students, but that we are serving the city of San Dimas through outreach, connection with McKinley, serving you through whatever ways possible. And we want to thank you so much, and especially our city manager and Sylvia for the incredible partnership together. So thank you so much, and we're going to celebrate this year.
Thank you. You know, one of the questions that pop up occasionally is about universities. Laverne has a university of which we all know. Okay, Azusa has a university that we all know, but a lot of us did not know up until the last couple of years that San Dimas has a university, and we're very proud of what we're watching and the opportunity that we have to grow with you and you grow with us. Just about 2 weeks ago, myself and Councilman Nakano, along with the city manager, met at the college, and we talked about the 100-year ceremonies, and we're looking very much forward to being a part of that. I had, as I also told you, that during the Christmas extravaganza, the holiday extravaganza, I had an opportunity to speak with some students from there. They had a fairly good-sized booth, and believe me, they were excited about being a part and asked to be a part of the extravaganza. And I want to thank the staff for reaching out to them and giving them the opportunity to become involved in our community. I think we're going to start seeing more and more people walking in the streets of downtown looking for restaurants and things like this. This is a growing experience. Right now, I'd like to present a proclamation from the city of San Dimas to Life Pacific University Centennial Year 1932 to 2023. Whereas founded in Los Angeles, California in 1923, an evangelistic and missionary training institute by Amy Semple McPherson, and in celebration of this 100th anniversary year of what has become Life Pacific University, offering regionally accredited traditional and online undergraduate and graduate degrees, and is a member of the National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics, NAIA, primarily competing in the Golden State Athletic Conference. Whereas since 1990, Life Pacific has had its home in San Dimas and is committed to equipping the next generation as they pursue their purpose and become leaders contributing to the public good in the areas and counseling of mental health, education, creative arts, social service, communications, business, and nonprofit management leadership, marketing and digital media, theology, missions, and humanitarian services. Whereas the university is dedicated to the holistic development of men and women through core life skills, spiritual foundation, competitive internship, and higher education degrees and programs. Its mission is to prepare transformational, local, and global leaders for the church and workplace of the world. Therefore, I, Mayor Emmett G. Badar, Mayor Pro Tem John Ebner, Council Members Eric Nakano, Ryan A. Vienna, and Eric Weber hereby proclaim January 10th, 2023 as the launch of the Life Pacific University Centennial Celebration in San Dimas. In witness thereof, I, Mayor Emmett G. Badar, have hereon set my hand and caused the seal of the city of San Dimas to be affixed this 10th day of January 2023. Madam President, we'll move on to oral communications. Members of the audience are invited to address the City Council on any item on this agenda or not on this agenda. Public comment will not be taken during each individual agenda item except for public hearing items. Comments on public hearing items will be heard when that item is scheduled for discussion. Under the provisions of the Brown Act, the legislative body is prohibited from engaging in discussions on any item not appearing on the posted agenda. However, your concerns may be referred to as staff or set for discussion at a later date. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. Any speaker cards?
First speaker is Kathy Amston from Charter Oak.
Good evening, Council. Approximately a year ago, I stood before this body to discuss concerns we had at Charter Oak Mobile Home Estates regarding the mismanagement of the park and the neglect by the city to take care of the mobile home park. I stand before you today once again as a concerned resident. In May of last year, after numerous meetings with the council, we had a study group and a committee was assigned to the park. It was not voted on by the residents. It was basically hand-selected by Haven Management with the blessing of the city, Thank you, city manager. And we didn't get to vote on them. So we have basically, the majority of the park have just stepped back and let them do their thing. Now, I stand before you today because at the resident committee meeting last week, they finally turned over some sort of accounting for the monies that they have spent. As you know, the park is run through the budget of the city. We run off the city's fiscal year. The city allocates 6 events for the resident each year to the tune of $7,000. This committee has already expended since July 1st the entire year's budget. They have spent money on things like a $1,422 karaoke machine. They have spent money for $450 for Hawaiian dancers when they held a luau. They spent $1,525 for the food for that luau. These events are not conducive to the majority of our seniors in this park. And there is no input from the majority of the seniors as to what the money is being spent on. Our fiscal year doesn't start again until July, and the money for this year has been expended. I'm asking for the council to appoint someone to do an audit, get the receipts, and find out where the money has been spent and how it was spent and whether or not it has been misappropriated. Events are things like brunches and lunches and dinners where all of the residents are invited to come and socialize together. And they spend them on things like movie night and karaoke night and things where a handful of about 25 residents show up. So I'm asking the City Council to take this under consideration, look into where this money has been spent, and get an accounting for the residents at Charter Oak. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nora Chen with the County Library.
Happy New Year, Mayor, City Council members, staff, and everyone. Today, I would like to remind everyone or the community that the St. Dimas Library, we offer services more than just books and DVDs. You can scan your document free and as many as you want. And you can print out up to 10 pages free, and you can check out the laptop and hotspot for 3 weeks free. You can also check out our state parks to visit our a lot of the good state parks, and it will be 2 weeks, and you can renew them if no one is on waiting. And the library receive more passes for the community to check out. And you can also get a free kind of the COVID-19 antigen testing kits. And of course, that with your library card, you can read books, download or stream movies online, and all of these services are free. And the most important thing that you can also participate in the in-person programs in the libraries. And this week, on Friday, January the 13th, that we will resume our weekly the Smarty Pants story time. It's a very good program for kids aged 2 to 5, and they will learn, read books, learn songs and rhymes and movement. It's a program to prepare kids to get ready for the school. So, and I would like to encourage everyone, if you haven't visited our library, please, it's just a neighbor, very close, and you can visit our website, lacountylibrary.org, for more services that we provide. Thank you.
Thank you.
Those were all the speaker cards turned in, Mayor.
Thank you. Is there, Margie?
Good evening. Sorry, I forgot to turn in a speaker's card. On behalf of the San Dimas Historical Society, I want to thank everybody for a great Christmas holiday season. We had a great time having a holiday boutique in the Walker House on the second floor. The money we make off of the boutique goes for the Historical Society to buy computers, pay our bills, and keep up with the technology that's going on. So thank you all very much for that. I also want to remind everybody we have a city historical society, a historical walking tour of the downtown San Dimas, and we've changed it from the first Saturday of the month to the second Saturday of the month. So everybody's invited. Hopefully it will not rain this weekend, but we will be open in the Walker House from 10 in the morning until 1 in the afternoon. This is for the museum and the gift shop, and just to come on by and see what's going on. We're hoping to have a lot more hours later on this year, but right now we're doing a walking tour of the downtown, and it starts at 10 o'clock. Meet at the Walker House. Dave Harbin will be giving the tour, and it really is interesting. You can bring the whole family to it. If you would, let us know if you're coming, and you can call Dave at area code 951-990-3395, or call the San Dimas Historical Society office, and that's a 909-592-1190. There again, we're here for the community, and we're hoping to be able to share our history with you and share the history we're making today with the future. So please come by and visit us at the Walker House. Thank you.
Thank you. Good, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, staff, and residents of San Dimas. My name is James Shirley, and I'm a resident of San Dimas, and I've lived in San Dimas for 23 years. And I have two questions. The first question is that as you're going down Via Verde towards the 10 freeway, that road is really torn up. It's got a lot of potholes in it, and it's been there for quite some time. It's doing a lot of damage to people's cars, knocking the wheels out of alignment and what have you. And the first question is that, is there funds allocated to fix those potholes as it travels down through San Dimas? That's the first question. The second question is that I received a letter in the mail that Chase Bank, that's located there in the Vaughn Shopping Center, is closing. And my question to the city council, are we looking to replace that bank with another bank, or what was the reason for the closure? Those are the two questions that I have. Thank you.
Maybe Sherry, we'll get someone to answer those two questions for you. You'll have the answer about the bank better than I do.
Good evening, Happy New Year. I wanted to thank you for selecting the Falco Management Company as the managers of Charter Oak. We finally have a professional, efficient, and caring management company. At least that's the information I hear from other members of the community. They had a meet and greet, and during the meet and greet, they mentioned that they were going to have a food brought into the clubhouse that was donated by suppliers. They have done this at other mobile homes, and they've done it for 4 or 5 years. And I don't know if you're aware, but we have a number of senior citizens who have been on Social Security for 20 or 30 years. They have no money for food. In fact, there's one gentleman in the park that has no money at all, and I have been buying him groceries. And with the inflation, I can no longer afford to buy him groceries. And there's someone else, a woman in the park who gets $40 a month on food stamps, and I can't buy her food because she gets angry at me. So when I heard this, I was so delighted, because this is a way for residents to obtain food, and it was done a long time ago, perhaps 15 years ago. They used to bring in bread and bakery goods from one of the supermarkets, and people were able to save some money by going to the clubhouse and obtaining the food. So for me, this has been a real blessing, not only for a good management company, but for people who are willing to walk the extra mile and help out the residents. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to speak to the council? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent calendar. All items on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion unless a member of the city council requests separate discussion.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 5-0. We'll move on to other business, a discussion for consideration of possible directions revising policies and procedures relating to enforcement of Chapter 13.36 of the San Dimas Municipal Code as it relates to community tree management. Mr. Wasserman, or it appears that Mr.
Good evening,
Farmer.
Mayor and Council. I'm Steve Farmer. I'm the Landscape Manager in the Parks and Recreation Department. I'll be presenting the staff report this evening. In 2022, the city issued 7 citations for egregious violations of Section 1336 of the San Dimas Municipal Code. This section addresses the pruning of community trees without a permit. Egregious cases are instances in which a tree is left seriously disfigured, dead, or likely to die as a result of unauthorized pruning. A resident's request regarding a citation they received for illegally pruning and ultimately killing a community tree has afforded the opportunity for this department to evaluate our policies and procedures of enforcement of Section 1336 of the Code. As required in Section 1336 of the Code, the Parks and Recreation Department is responsible for maintaining the city's urban forest. It's also responsible for establishing a community forest management plan, stating policies, procedures, and standards concerning the selection, maintenance, and removal of community trees. Per the Municipal Code, the Community Forest Management Plan, the Director of Parks and Recreation is charged with granting or denying issuance of all permits for planting, pruning, or maintenance of trees. He is also responsible for enforcing Section 13 of the Municipal Code. When a resident submits a request for a tree permit to be removed, pruned, or modified, the request is evaluated by a municipal arborist. The arborist will make a recommendation to the director either to deny the request, grant the request, or grant the request with provisions. Section 13 of the Code stipulates any person who violates this provision is guilty of a misdemeanor. So any work done to a city tree without a permit is by definition a misdemeanor. The current fine for pruning a community tree in the absence of approved permit is $500. In instances in which the tree must be removed and replaced as a result of the improper maintenance, the cost of removal, replacement, and aftercare greatly exceeds $500. Per Section 1336 of the code, a person responsible for damaging or killing a community tree can also be held liable to the city for all costs related to the tree's removal, disposal, and replacement. A resident can also be held liable for the assessed value of the mature tree that must be removed to improper care. To date, we have only fined those 7 people for the damage they did to those trees. We have not required them to pay the assessed value or the replacement cost of those trees. To put this in contrast, for the cost, our contractor, West Coast Arborist, charges anywhere from $122 to $1,000 to remove a tree, depending on its size. A replacement tree for a 15-gallon tree is $149. 2-4-inch box tree is $305. The assessed value of our tree inventory ranges from $3,000 to $24,000 for a tree. So a $500 fine is the minimum of what we do right now. The city's master fee schedule includes the following fines for violations of the municipal code. It's $100 for the first offense, $200 for the second, and $500 for the third. The progressive approach to fines is intended to result in lower fines for first-time offenders and higher fines for repeat offenders. However, we've issued the citations at the maximum amount due to the irreparable and lasting damage caused by the egregious work to these trees. To provide context for the level of the fine, the cities of Claremont and Glendora issue fines in the amount of $1,000 for damaging trees. The city of Laverne issues citations for performing proper work based on the evaluation of the tree. All that usually exceeds $500. Staff has taken this opportunity to present these policies and procedures to you for evaluation for enforcement of Chapter 1336 of the Municipal Code to allow you to discuss if we want to continue on this same route or modify what we do. Staff will continue to educate the public about community tree care, and we only issue citations for unpermitted egregious acts against the trees. If people do routine maintenance, we correct them on what they should and shouldn't be doing, but we do not issue them a citation. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to ask some questions of Mr. Farmer?
I have 2 questions, Steve. One is, I was wondering, so we're talking about community trees.
Yes.
And the fines and all that kind of stuff. Are trees that are in an open space easement or scenic easement that is private property, are those trees included in what you're talking about?
These are only trees that are owned and maintained by the city. So if they're private property trees, the code for that falls under a different section, is Section 18 of the Municipal Code under planning's jurisdiction.
Okay, and are the fines kind of aligned in those two?
The fine schedule is the same as the stated in the report. It's the 100, 200, 500. That's our standard fine schedule for the city. It's not indicative of either department.
So if we were inclined to change that fee schedule in some way, would it apply to both types of trees, common or community trees, as well as the private property trees? And I'm talking about a scenic easement or open space easement on private property, not a person's yard.
That would be determined if you wanted to take it that direction. Right now, the fine schedule is the same for both.
I see.
I imagine I'm not the attorney, so I imagine you could probably separate the fine schedule for a public tree versus a private tree.
Got it. The other question was, has the Parks and Recreation Commission had a chance to weigh in on this at all?
I don't believe we sent it to the Parks and Recreation Commission.
Okay, just asking.
No.
Okay, that's all my questions.
Does the city currently, would a homeowner, let's say a property sells 3 times, since the city plants a tree in it, like during the urban forest initiative or whatever, when we're out giving trees away and we're going to plant them in the city's easement on private property, as Councilmember Ebner talked about, does the city do any follow-up with residents on any regular basis to notify them that those trees are in fact their or the city's responsibility to maintain?
We do outreach through their website and through Arbor Day events. On the city's website, if you move into the city, if you have a question on trees, it only takes you 3 clicks to get to the urban forest plan. And actually on our homepage for our department, there's a tree section that lets people know that if they want to work on a parkway tree or a public tree, that they need to get a permit or at least contact the department.
So like on a property, and I can think of a few of them that I know about where, a resident has the curb,
and then they've got the easement, but they believe it's their front lawn.
Yes.
And the city, at some point in history, puts one of these, very sacred trees there, and then the house sells, and maybe it sells again. Is the city doing anything to educate perhaps the new resident that in fact is their responsibility, or is not? I mean, they're watering it. I think they would believe that's their tree as a new homeowner.
We don't have a formal outreach program for when houses sell. I would hope that the new buyer does their due diligence and understands what they're getting into when they buy their property, and looks at their deed and sees that there's a easement at the front of their property that's back of sidewalk. That's not always the case.
Okay.
In line with Ryan's question, because it's a great question, and some of those you're talking about the public right-of-way in that case. It's actually public property.
It's a planting easement back of sidewalk.
But sometimes you got the sidewalk right up against the curb, and then you have an additional 5 or so feet, maybe 6 feet of not curb that adjoins and is seamless with the front yard of the person, the person you're talking about. And like Kai Linda is a case like that, and there's a lot of trees that are city trees, but you can't tell if you're a property owner or even driving by that they're city trees. They look like they're in a person's front yard. So, and I don't know the answer to this, so here's a question. Are cities ever require realtors or person representing the seller of the property to place some kind of disclosure in the papers that the new property owner would get?
That's what you're getting at.
Thank you, Council. Scott Wasserman, Parks and Recreation Director. I don't know that it's required, but I know that we had a case last year where a house was recently sold, and the realtor actually did make that disclosure that there was a landscape easement there. But I don't know if that's the norm, and I can't say if that routinely takes place.
So I guess to not belabor the point and just talk turkey here, why we're even talking about this, is the fact that, at least from my perspective, it is not reasonable to, from a resident's perspective, that it would be assumed that they know. These properties turn over, and I think to Councilman Ebner's point, which is kind of why I was hoping to have this discussion at some point, is that, I think it's a gap in some of our policies and procedures as it relates to this. I don't agree with fining someone $500 or even $100 if they didn't know that was the city's tree. And I think the easement, it's still their property, right? That's not city property in some of these residential cases. This is just a landscape easement where we retain that for utilities and other things. Is that correct?
Correct.
So,
are you sure about that? We maybe have to ask Sherry, but the public right-of-way, I think, extends a certain amount, which is actually public property.
I don't think so.
And
it's not
that's
my understanding.
Why I was wondering.
So typically, roadways are dedicated easements for city purposes. So most of the roadways in the city are actually an easement on property. The city makes full use of the easement, but if we were to vacate the roadway, then the underlying property owner would get the property back.
So on Calle Linda, for example, just in Villa Verde, there's a lot of streets where the sidewalks are against the curb.
That's all.
So is the sidewalk city property? First of all, talking about just the sidewalk. Is the sidewalk itself city property, or is that on private property and a city easement?
So the property owners, typically in modern subdivisions, property owners own the property to the center of the street, basically, okay? The city right-of-way is actually a roadway, a street easement.
Okay.
That takes precedent over that section of property.
Thanks.
So,
I didn't actually know that the street was not actually the city's property.
It is, we're making use of the surface and the underlying surface.
That's good to know.
So I guess, as it relates to this discussion, as some of this has come up, is that I don't from my perspective, I'm one of 5, but to me, if we look at those instances, I don't agree with finding a homeowner $500, or $100 perhaps, when they may not have had any knowledge. And in the context of burden of proof, we, the city, from what it sounds like, are not requiring perhaps the realtors or whomever in a transaction to actually disclose either the easement or even this tree. I'm more concerned about the tree than the easement. I think the easement, there's a lot of reasons why the city retains the easements and we need the easements, but I think the issues of these trees, I can think of 5 people off the top of my head that have trees in their front lawns right now that I am pretty confident have no clue that that's the city's tree. I think they believe because it's in their front lawn, because they're watering it, because of all of those reasons, because they put their Christmas lights on it during a holiday season. I don't think they believe that to be a city tree. And go ahead.
We do trim those trees every 4 years too.
What's that?
We do trim those trees every 4 years.
Yeah.
So the city, with our contractor, every 4 years will be in their front yard trimming that tree.
Right.
And, just a note on the 7 citations we issued last year, none of them were in that area. They were all parkway trees on a defined parkway between sidewalk and curb.
So some of those trees too that, like when they're younger, I guess, when they're newly installed, I know, and from what I've talked to a couple people, the city will come around in the beginning, this thing gets installed, they check up on it, make sure it's up and running. But then after a while, this tree is just kind of left. So, it doesn't seem to be a lot of activity, I guess, with a tree and just a resident's front lawn, at least from what homeowners are conscious of anyways, because I'm not saying they may not come around when people are at work, staff may not, but does that happen, or are people not seeing it, or is a tree generally left to grow until it becomes of age where we need to maintain it? Because if we're encumbering funds or we're saving money, I guess, because we installed the tree and it's going to take 5 years before it requires any significant maintenance, is that a cost that we're actually having a savings in the city and then realize? So would a homeowner not see the city touching that tree for a while?
Normally, I don't see us touching the tree unless they're home in the daytime. We do irrigate new trees. We usually do that for about 1.5 to 2 years, depending on the species and the weather conditions. So the homeowner's not required to water as heavily as we do. We actually have a crew that does go out between West Coast Arborists and ourselves and water those trees. Usually after 2 years, the tree is established, and with routine watering by the resident, it will stay healthy and mature. So the new trees, when they put in, do take some minor pruning. A lot of that's done by the city's crew, not the arborist. I mean the arborist, but not the West Coast Arborist. It's done in-house. So there was a cost savings on that point from a contractor standpoint. We use them for our grid trim, where it's a much larger tree that takes a lot more work. And just so you're aware of that, our grid trim price right now is $78 per tree.
We give these trees away usually?
We plant the trees.
I mean, for free, no cost to a resident?
Correct. We have a planting budget, which, if you remember last August, the council doubled for this fiscal year from 10,000 to 20,000.
So we plant it, we give it to a resident, they are expected to water it, not maintain it. They may or may not know it's their responsibility to not cut it, and then we may turn around and fine them for something that they took for free from us.
If we plant a tree in your front yard, we notice you that one, we're going to be planting the tree, 2, that it is a city tree, and we will be irrigating it for the first 1.5 to 2 years, and we do maintain it in the future. It's, we try not to, surprise, we put a tree in your front yard.
But do we tell them on the front end that they could be fined up to $500, $1,000 or more if they do something to that tree when they're accepting that tree?
No, we try not to come across that as heavy-handed and threatening.
We just do it on the back end when the tree's so big you can't remove it. And positive. Surprise!
Yeah, we try to keep it positive with our interaction with them.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Quick question. Are the trees that are in that particular instance, like as I look at the issue, parkway trees on like a center median or something is fairly clearly not a private property tree. But in these instances where we're dealing with easements and private property, I think there is some gray area there where, again, there is some reasonable expectation by a homeowner that they're doing sometimes maintenance that they believe is in good faith, even though it may injure, damage, or kill a tree. So my question, when I think of different public utilities that are out and about in the community that belong to somebody other than the owner of the property that the public utility sits on, they're usually marked or tagged in some way as, this power pole belongs to Southern California Edison, and here's the pole number. And when you call Southern California Edison, they know exactly where that pole is because you tell them it's pole E12345. And they can pull it right up on their map and say, I know exactly what pole you're talking about. So I would hope that if we're fining people for doing maintenance on trees, that there is some reasonable reasonable doubt as to whether the tree is theirs or not. That I would prefer that if we're going to go the fining route, that we somehow designate a tree as belonging to the city, a metal tag or something like that. I don't know how it works. Obviously, I'm not an arborist, but denoting it somehow as, hey, this isn't your tree and don't trim it, would be key for me looking at that moving forward. Do we do anything similar to that?
We don't tag all of our trees. We have over 9,000 trees in the city. We do have an inventory of which trees are ours. One thing I'd like to add to this that you brought up about maintaining trees. If a resident just goes out and trims his tree off cycle or off grid, we're not going to cite them on that. If we catch them doing it, we will educate them that it is a city tree, it is a city maintained tree. Some trees occasionally need some pruning off cycle. When that happens, they can actually put a request into us, and we will come out and we will trim it at our cost, and they will not have to do that. The 7 citations we issued last year were basically they hat racked the trees. There's absolutely zero foliage left on these things. They're just sticks. They look like your hand. So we do not cite willy-nilly. It's the worst case scenario when we do a citation. And like I said, we only issued 7 of those, and we did 0 the previous year. So it's not like we're running around issuing citations frequently. It's actually a very rare occurrence for us.
So, as you bring that up, it reminds me of, quite honestly, my neighbor's tree. And every single year they chop that thing down to just the trunks. Mm-hmm. And within 3 months, it seems, it's all the way back to a full canopy again. And without trimming it down, just like you're explaining, down to just the branches, it gets so thick and dense that it just takes over the whole yard. I honestly think it's an invasive tree, but I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble. But I think they're
neighbor.
Yeah.
Arboriculturally, that tree's probably got a very poor structure.
Is that to the left or the right?
Yeah. It was at the mayor's house.
Got no trees.
So I guess the trimming of a tree in that way, I mean, I look at that particular example of a tree and think that, it's probable that somebody, especially that's not an arborist or that's not a tree trimming company, although I have seen some tree trimming companies do some hack jobs at trimming trees. It's very possible that somebody who just means well but doesn't know what they're doing may injure a tree in that way. And that brings up another kind of point, is that there are those tree trimming crews that'll just go door to door in the city. And hey, for $200 we'll trim your tree, and a resident thinking, oh, that sounds like a good deal, and I'd really like that tree trimmed up. And they come out and find, just the sticks left, and so that's kind of the conundrum that I'm debating. But yeah.
Mr. Mayor.
Chris.
Steve, in our inventory, how many of the trees would you presume, guesstimate, would be in that landscape easement that would presumably look like it's on a private property? rough number.
20%, 25% max.
How many?
About 20%, mostly the south end of the city, the Villa Verde area,
Somewhere in the order of 1,800, 1,600 trees.
roughly, yeah. I'd have to pull the Arbor Access up and get the true numbers, but
So we would know the property and therefore the address that those trees would be on, correct?
yeah, we have an inventory of all our trees, so we can identify them.
So I think what I'm hearing from the council is we're protecting our trees in the park strip, trees in the median. The average resident would know that those trees are city. But a tree that looks like it's in a front yard may or may not be something that's clear to a resident to know. And while the city does outreach, and so we publish every quarter in our Parks and Recreation publication, we have the website and do some other outreach, we don't do anything specifically targeting any residence that has a tree that exists that is in that location, this 16 to 1,800 trees. And so therefore, our practice is not to go after somebody who may trim or reasonably maintain a tree, even if it may be in violation of touching one of our trees. But if it's an extreme case of it, we would go after them. However, the quandary that I'm hearing is, I may not know that when I go cut the tree. It looks like it's in my front lawn. I go cut the tree by no intent to try to damage or destroy a city tree. And now I'm going to be faced with an enforcement action where if I haven't seen a quarterly publication or the website, the city is now going to come down on me. And in this case, it's only 7 individuals, but there is a potential. Who knows what that would be? And also, if you're that resident, it could be a risk. One option the council can consider, and I would want staff to speak to this if it's something that's viable, would be some type of notification that could go to those addresses that have a tree that it may not be very clear that that tree is the obligation restricted by code to be touched, just as a courtesy notification about the obligations to approach the city prior to maintaining that tree. And maybe that addresses the concerns that I'm hearing from 2 council members about obligations. But I'd ask, if that's the direction you want to go, let park staff speak to that, its viability, and whether there's an alternative.
I think that sounds reasonable. I mean, just listening, and Councilmember Weber brings up a good point, and I think Councilmember Ebner brought up some good things that, I think that on some sort of regular basis, whether it's annual or otherwise, the city should interact or at least notify maybe those 20% where there is this question of ownership. And I would go a step further to think that perhaps we should require realtors, to be able to disclose that in those situations wherein this condition exists in the city, and reach out to the local realtors or anyone listing, with the city. I guess listening to the math, it just sounds mind-blowing to me, just the math of this, somebody damaging a tree or whatever the case may be. And then the follow-up effort for enforcement and all of that stuff. Could we divest from these trees, these 20% that are on private property that appear to be what a reasonable person would probably think is their tree? I guess, Jeff, could we, the city, say that, sure, just like at Arbor Day, where we give away these saplings and somebody takes them and plants it in their front yard. In this instance, we have people that have taken a tree from the city, and planted it, maybe didn't get all the fine print about, what could happen on the tail end of this thing when it becomes a huge tree and a huge problem and you try to cut it because it's uprooting half of your front lawn or whatever the case may be. Could the city just say those trees are now the responsibility of the homeowners and divest itself of requiring enforcement action against those trees?
Jeff, before you answer that, though, I've had this incident several times over the last 10 years or so, where we had a tree. We went out and drew out on a map all of our trees, all the city trees and the measurement. And then I had one guy over in Villa Verde who has a huge pine tree in his yard, and the city's been trimming it for the last 30 years. And all of a sudden, he now finds out that he is responsible for trimming this tree at some figure, $7,000, $10,000 or something like that. And for the whole period of his time, he thought that that was a city tree. And then we find out that he's 6 inches past the limit. So, and then there are people out there, even though we, haven't identified them or they haven't called, but there are people who's talked about that in the past. And so my question would be, if we now say, here, you now have this tree, and he says, well, hell, the city's been paying me for paying to have it trimmed for the last 20 years. Now you're going to soak me with a $10,000 bill to trim it. Where does that become, the fair part of it?
Well, that's right. If we were to divest, if the city was to divest from all of these trees that look like they're in someone's front yard, then the city presumably would not be doing the regular 4-year maintenance on the trees. And so it would be completely the residents' responsibility to water and maintain, and the city would not do it anymore. So the residents would not receive the benefit of that maintenance that the city already does right now. So I guess in your case
how many seats do we have in this auditorium? Because I guarantee you every seat will be full once we start doing that.
And it'll be full of everyone that's been cited over history for
Well, there's
not
only
wanting
7
a
right
tree.
now.
No, well, this year, could somebody opt, could we create an option where people could say, I don't want the city, I don't want to be subject to fine or penalty, although understanding if they butchered a tree, as Councilman Eber pointed out and Mr. Farmer did, that they would still be subject to a fine, but it's not their responsibility to maintain, and that tree, they could opt to say, I don't want the city to maintain it, if it is within the easement, and be done with it. And then we're not responsible for the maintenance of that tree anymore.
That's an interesting idea. That may be possible. It might be something that we can do with code, or it might be something that we would have to do individual agreements with each property owner that wants to do this. So,
At what point would that become a gift of public funds?
well, I think there's an argument that we're giving them a tree, but then there's an argument also that the city is saving maintenance costs by not having to maintain that tree anymore.
And they're
So
watering it regardless, right?
Well, so I'd say before we discuss that policy, that might be something we want to put on a future agenda.
That's what I was going to say. Is if the council wanted us
staff
to
would
look
I'm
at
sorry,
that.
Jeff, go ahead.
If you wanted us to look at that and investigate and figure out if there's a way to do it, then we could bring that back.
Yeah.
John brought up something very early in the conversation, and that was about this issue been talked with or with the Parks and Rec Commission. Is that something that we might talk about or send back to them to take a look at?
We can certainly do that, absolutely.
And I mean,
We've consulted them on other aspects of the community forest management plan. We have not specifically consulted them regarding how we enforce this chapter.
Okay. I think I would be supportive of that going back to Parks and Rec, but that'll be up to
I'm fine with that.
4 other people.
I'm fine with that. For my own part, I was going to say that, Emmett, if I understood your example correctly, that pine tree you were talking about was actually not within the city easement. It was actually inside the property.
Inside the property, but we had been maintaining it for 20-plus years. And then I was really surprised that the numbers the guy was quoting, they get the tree trimmed. And then once I talked to Deborah Day, and then I talked to our past Parks and Rec director, and I found out that we had the tree trimmed for $700 or something. So it just didn't make much sense. And I don't know, now you're talking time. So,
well, the people we use now, West Coast arborists, do a pretty good job of trimming the trees. I know some specific bad examples, including the one in front of my house, but they generally do a really good job. I honestly don't know what happened to the one in front of my house. It's just a weird one, but so it is that kind of benefit as we're talking about. And so getting back to what the agenda item is actually about, the fining and whether we're enforcing those rules, I think with the suggestions that have been made about contacting realtors in town about this kind of a disclosure that, yeah, that tree right there is a community tree, and the city maintains it, but you're supposed to water it, and you're not supposed to trim it. Actually, not supposed to trim it at all, but you're especially not supposed to cut it down or trim it so poorly. And then the city reaching out, I don't know if on our spreadsheet or our list of the 9,000 trees, if there's a little box that could be checked saying this is a tree that a homeowner may think is in that homeowner's front yard. And like an area without sidewalks, for example, is another example where it's just a continuous lawn all the way to the curb, and there might be a city tree, right there 3 feet from the curb, but the homeowner may not know that and disclose that to, or somehow contact those homeowners on some annual 2 years, 3 years, whatever basis to let them know. I don't know how much that kind of thing would cost.
I don't know the answer offhand, but we can certainly explore that.
Because you don't want anybody you want people to be clear. You want them to know that they're doing something wrong.
Correct. And as an example, the way the process is set up, if someone does receive a citation, they can appeal it. There are a couple of appeals. One of them goes to the director, and there was one that I dismissed last year. It was a good example. I spoke about it earlier, where someone had just purchased the home. There was a tree in their yard that was part of our easement, and they were unaware. Their real estate agent didn't disclose that. And as they were purchasing the house, they had a gardener come in, and I forget if they removed the tree or if they hacked it, but pardon me? Okay. We think it was trimmed back, but that was one that I rescinded that citation because I felt that they demonstrated that, they didn't know. There was no way for them to know. So we do have that discretion, and generally we're trying to walk that line of balancing how we believe council would like us to implement this in a way that's very fair to our residents, but also in a way that also protects our infrastructure that we've spent a little bit of money on. So we'll absolutely continue to be fair, and if council would like us to take this to the Parks Commission, we can certainly do that as well.
I'd be supportive of that. I also think fine print's important. I think the fine should be told up front. I think people should understand that when this thing grows big and tall, and that if they should be found doing any of what John just said, that they're going to be fined for it. Because I don't think we should hide from that. And if it dissuades them from planting a tree, so be it. But I think it's not fair to residents to get a surprise because we're trying to up however many trees we put in this city without telling people what their ultimate responsibility is going to be and what the enforcement action is going to be against them potentially. So I think, that's no different than signing a contract. We give them, hey, here's a tree for free, enjoy it, and so many years later we have a problem. I also would support the recommendation to have the Parks and Recreation Commission weigh in. I also would like the city attorney to evaluate divesting from the trees or an options contract or option to residents who may not be interested in or who are already maintaining the tree rather and may just want to do it because, as Councilmember Weber pointed out, on a Saturday, they might just have somebody show up that can give them one heck of a deal to trim their trees, and they may do it, and next thing you know, they've got one heck of a fine in front of them for something they didn't otherwise know or have knowledge of, and we've not given any proof or otherwise that we've told them.
Yeah, there's no doubt that you go to Villa Verde or go to any part of the city on a weekend, all you hear is chainsaws and buzzsaws, and I'm not talking about the whole tree coming down, but that does happen. I think we all know that. But I think, as Councilman Bertone said on many, many occasions, that he could drive up and down the street, and 3 blocks away he could hear that he could guess what day it was. He knew it was a Saturday or he knew it was a Sunday. There was no doubt in his mind. And quite honestly, I think you're going to have a very difficult time convincing or enforcing having realtors say that little tree out front of your yard is not your tree, it's the city's tree. I just don't see that really happening. Most people look at their property, they look in their backyard, they know those are their trees, okay? But yeah, we do have a lot of big yards and stuff with trees in front, but as you get closer to that curb, people are, they're now blinded by the fact that, I'm putting water on it, so it could be my tree, but god dang, why ain't the city trimming their tree? So I just don't see realtors being held accountable for that myself.
You're bringing up great points tonight. You're asking great questions. I think what we can do is, another thing we can do is look at how other cities reach out to their residents regarding the trees and appropriate that outreach model, perhaps for the city of San Dimas. So we can do a little research and make sure everyone's more comfortable with how we're operating.
I think research is good, but sometimes it's okay to be a trendsetter, okay? If we wanted to, the reality is every city's going to have something, and us coming up with the best policy is by looking at everybody's position on it and everything, but it's okay if we're trendsetters too.
I'd like to be a trendsetter in planting trees, to be honest.
Mr. Mayor,
How much more money do you want?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I have a few questions I'd like to ask.
Sure, I'm sorry,
Thank you. I had a couple of points that I wanted to clarify, if I could, Mr. Farmer.
I'm sorry.
I had a few points that I wanted to clarify and a few questions for you, if I may. The first thing is you said that there were no fines or people cited last year. This year there were 7. Is that correct still?
Yes.
Okay. And of those 7, all of them were not on easements, they were on parkways, so it was really clear that they were cutting trees that they should have known were not their property. Is that correct?
All 7 cases went through appeal, and on the appeal, all 7 cases admitted that they knew it was a city tree.
They all knew? Okay.
Yes.
And can you provide, was it the same person who cut those 7, or were they 7 different cases?
7 different cases.
7 different cases,
and
okay.
To help put this a bit in perspective too, is on 2 of the cases, they have multiple trees on the parkway. They were not issued a citation for every tree. They were issued one lump citation for all the work. The code actually allows us to cite every tree, but we don't do that. We only cited the one resident for multiple trees. So
why was it, if it was clear that the resident knew that those were not their tree, and it seems like they willfully violated the law, why would they not be cited for each tree?
We cited them in general for the work on all the trees as an aggregate, not just each tree, because we try not to be that heavy-handed.
Okay.
It's more educational, saying, the fine is basically a slap on the wrist, in this case a big slap on the wrist, to don't do that again.
The fines are, they're issued not necessarily for maintenance, but when there is an egregious case of damage to the tree. Is that correct?
Correct. If you just trim your tree, and if we're aware of that, we ask you not to do that. That we do trim every tree every 4 years.
I see.
But the 7 cases, if you look in the packet, there's pictures of some of these trees to where the term we use is hat rack, where there's absolutely zero foliage on the tree. It's just stubs. And most trees don't recover from that.
Were they, when they did this work, were they aware that they were going to damage the tree, or did they maybe hire, I don't know, an incompetent gardener or something? Was there intent there to destroy the tree, do you believe, in your judgment?
No, the intent was just to cut the tree back. Some people, there's a couple of cases where they didn't want the tree in their parkway, and they cut it back severely.
Okay. How many of the 7 were replaced? Or were so
2.
damaged that it was beyond repair?
2.
Okay, and the 5, are they so structurally damaged that they won't ever return to form?
Yeah, this is done this past summer, so we're seeing how they recover through the spring. We'll make a determination in about 5 months.
I see. Do any cities, rather than issue fines, issue a bill for damages or replacement, to your knowledge?
Every city's a bit different.
Okay.
Our code allows us to actually recoup the assessed value of the tree. On the two trees we did replace, we did not pursue that.
Okay.
Even though we have the legal right to do so. That's a bit heavy-handed as well. That now puts the fine up into the thousands.
I see.
Which, 500 is steep.
Sure.
Us coming after you for, potentially, $3,000 to $7,000.
Sure, but if there was intent here in these 7 cases where they knew they weren't trees and they knew that they were going to damage them, in some cases, you said purposefully to remove the trees, then it seems to me that that might be a fair remedy in this
Potentially,
situation,
yes.
is it not?
Yeah, but it also, for our standpoint too, depends on the species of trees.
Okay.
One of the ones that failed is Mr. Ebner's favorite crepe myrtle.
Okay.
Crepe myrtle.
You had
So
mentioned
tree
that,
was,
that in some cases, so these are the 7 that were actually fined. How many total trees were significantly damaged, and of those, how many were appealed? Because it sounds like this is a fraction of it, but there was a larger number last year where somebody had maintained it, not just maintained it, but maintained a damage, and then there was some consideration of whether a fine should be issued. Do you know the number to
There were
that?
a total of 10 trees.
10 trees, okay. All right.
Two of them have been replaced.
Okay. When I'm looking at the fines, it looks like we're the only one that does levels, so 100 first time, 200 the second time, 500. Do Glendora and Claremont issue 1,000 for the first time, or is there also some sort of a schedule?
It's $1,000 per incident.
I see. Okay.
There's no graduated scale. It's just one fine amount.
So it seems like our policy then right now is extremely accommodating and flexible. We give people the ability to appeal. In many cases, those appeals are honored. We issue very low fines, and of those fines, all of them have been for instances where those trees, it was very clear that the person knew that those were not on their property. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. The only other thing I would ask the attorney to do is he's considering looking at the divestiture would be to see if there's any laws or considerations that would cover certain types of trees. So for example, if, I'm not even aware, but if we had oak trees, I would imagine that there's probably other additional laws regarding those that, even if we were given the option, there may be other things that prevent that from happening. Would that be a consideration you could take into account as well?
Yes, I can look at that as well if the council wants to add that to the direction tonight.
Yeah.
I'm in support of the other council members asking that the Commission of Jurisdiction, in this case the Parks and Rec Commission, look at this in greater detail. But my view of this is some of the scenarios that we at first feared do not seem to be in the case in this instance. There seems to be quite a bit of flexibility. If anything, maybe our rules and such seem to be too lenient. And so it may be something, again, that requires a level of input and discussion within the commission, and then maybe, again, review here where we're able to look at this and all the matters that relate to it. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, for the time. I also had one other question. Is this an item where the public gets to weigh in at all, or is this an opportunity for public comment? Is not. Okay. Thank you.
Chris?
Let me address it a little bit here. The item's before you because I requested it come forth. So staff has recently started enforcing this type of $500 fine on trees. And so we had a situation that happened over the course of the summertime where somebody was assessed who believed they were assessed wrongly. And in evaluating that case, I started asking questions of how we enforce and what do we do. And so right now, there's a total of 7 violations that we've cited. The concern isn't that we're doing a lot of them right now. There's 7, and we can deal with that. The concern isn't, should staff have some flexibility related to it? They should. We do have that discretion in a number of different places. The real concern is, it's not about the 7 or where we're at today, it's where we could be tomorrow. There's 1,800 trees in a space that is our obligation but seemingly look like they're private. There's 9,000 plus trees across the entire city. We take pride in our trees, we protect our trees, but we also take pride in the fact that we want to be consistent in how we apply the law. And so right now, there is nothing codified that provides consistency in certain aspects of this. The scenario that Councilmember Viena raised, yes, there will be residents that do not know that this tree is a city tree and requires a permit or the permission of the city to impact that tree. And it may be because they're a new resident that moved in which case we had one example where it was, and we use discretion to not penalize that individual. But that leads down the road to saying to real estate agents, or somebody saying to anybody who may buy a house, as soon as you buy that house, you make sure you cut all those trees on your property, because you'll get a pass. The city's done it before, and if they come after you, we'll cite those examples and we'll do it again. And so I'm looking at this from a consistent policy perspective. And so I don't mind what the fine may be, 100, 500, 1,000. I just care that how we apply the rule is equally applied to all residents. And so when I look at that, I haven't done the research in all the cities, but there is at least one other city that's an example where real estate agents are required to disclose obligations about those trees in the park strip to the new property owners. It's chapter 13.28 of the San Jose Municipal Code. That's a requirement. It doesn't require, you're supposed to have 1 tree in front of a residence, 3 if it's a corner property. You are not required to place the tree. You're just required to notify the future owner of their obligation. And so that is one avenue if you want to go down the route of notifying residents when the house transact. But I think there's a simpler solution. We have a small number of trees, and all we need to do is a certain amount of notifications so it's reasonable. And if we miss the notifications, there's a transaction and somebody fell through the cracks, then we have the discretion where this individual we can demonstrate was not notified reasonably, and in which case we have the discretion to say we will not go after this individual for the fine. But if we demonstrate that we've provided notifications every 2 years to certain property owners that are on our inventory where we have the addresses that these are your obligations, and then after 4 notifications, the same property owner goes and cuts down a tree, we can demonstrate that they should have known they needed to approach the city, and therefore we do not have to exercise discretion not to go after them. We fine them. I think with 2,000 trees, we're talking a small dollar amount for doing notifications on some periodic basis to address the obligation, and that addresses what was my primary concern about, does this person know the obligations that they're going to be held accountable for at the end?
I do believe, though, that the fine, so I agree with you that the policy should be consistent and that there is a measure of notification. Councilman Viena brings up a really good point along with Councilman Ebner about fairness and not knowing. But in the cases that were cited where you had somebody go in and admitted they knew that those were not their trees and they damaged 2 trees, potentially a bunch more, and was this their first offense? They were cited $100 for all the damage to the trees? Was that the case in that situation?
No, we assess the fine at the maximum, which is $500 on all 7 cases.
So my point is that if somebody is causing so much damage that the fines cover a fraction of the damage, I do think that the fine should also be looked at in conjunction with the fairness of the policy and the rest, right? Because you don't want to have a case where somebody is mowing down dozens of trees with intent and then they're assessed $500, right? That seems like a relative bargain, and the city is caught picking up the tab for that.
Yes, but we have to recognize in a lot of these cases, the enforcement is on a reactive basis, not a proactive basis. So we don't go around town and identifying every single instance of a tree being significantly impacted, determining that it's a city tree, and therefore going after the individuals if they demonstrate intent that they knew. And so this is, in these cases, I don't know if it's all of them, but I know some of them, a neighbor reported their neighbor that they cut the tree and it's a city tree, and that's why the city is there to evaluate the trees. But if you're down the street and the neighbor didn't report that city tree, we are not necessarily going after that second homeowner to go after the tree. So from a consistency perspective, if you piss somebody off in your neighborhood and you start reporting work that you're doing, you're getting penalized, but the other resident may not.
But we don't want that kind of inconsistency. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. So I look at it from a, we can go after every resident for every tree for the full value of the tree, just like we did at the Gold Line, and cost a resident thousands of dollars for a tree that they had in their front yard. Or we can at least provide the notification and educate all the residents that may have a city tree on their property on some periodic basis. So at least at that point, we've leveled the playing field. How we apply the law now becomes more consistent because we can demonstrate knowledge that they knew. So when we have some instance that we find that tree cut down, then we can penalize them, as opposed to somebody we can demonstrate it's very clear that they may have not known about this and it wouldn't have been common knowledge, and therefore be a little more lenient.
Well, we definitely have to do that kind of a notification. And I would say on anything that's confusing, like where there's no sidewalk, for example, you often get those things in the mail saying, did you know that the water line is your responsibility? Or you might find out, as many residents have, that the outgoing sewer line is their responsibility all the way to where it connects in the middle of the street with the sewer, including under the asphalt, which is really, mind-boggling. But, so in this case, notification, I like the idea of San Jose's ordinance saying realtors got to disclose. I mean, like anything else, if the residents, we should be as fair as possible, and part of that is making sure the residents know what to do about certain trees.
All right. I think I'm hearing a consensus. Is that what we just need, a consensus, or do we need a motion to continue this matter till it gets a chance to get ahead to the Parks and Rec? I think we've talked about it a lot, unless anybody else wants to continue talking about it.
I have one thing or actually two things, if I can mention really quick. First is, to Councilmember Nakano's point that, theoretically speaking, anybody could cut down any number of trees maliciously, willfully, just because they don't like the trees, and knowing that they were not city property and they were city property, and theoretically they could just get away with it over and over again with a relatively small fine. But something that we're kind of glancing over a little bit is that we're talking about administrative fines here for the city's purpose, and it completely omits the criminal side of potential vandalism. If we're able to prove that somebody's intentionally cutting down a tree because they just don't like it and they know, or not reasonably should have, if we can prove that they knew that was a city tree and they cut it down and it cost $2,000, they can get arrested. So that's, again, as we look towards like an escalating, repeat offender type of situation, I could see potentially a situation arise if somebody were to be cutting down trees with what they believe to be impunity because they just pay the fine and move on. That, a vandalism charge and trees easily exceed over $950. I could easily see it be a big deal in that it would be a felony. Second, I was just thinking about this as Councilmember Ebner was talking, as far as notification goes. So I think the real estate disclosures are fantastic. One thing that I had to do when I was digging in my backyard was call 811 for a dig alert. So I made sure that I didn't knock out the internet to the whole neighborhood or, crack into a Golden State water line, which I've done before. So it would be interesting to see what we can do with our City of San Dimas app. Like, for instance, if we could do like a trim alert where you take a picture of a tree, and as we do with cleanups or whatever throughout the city that gets sent to Public Works, if somebody were to take a picture of a tree, submit it to the city, and then the city looks at the geotag location of that tree, and from the comfort of our office and from the comfort of their home, they get a determination from the city whether that is a city tree or whether that's a homeowner's tree and who's responsible for it. That might be something to look into, just catching up with the 21st century.
I was thinking along the lines of what he was, that perhaps you'd have these 2,000 or whatever homes that perhaps making an address check on the website, so someone could just go in and type in their address. Should be relatively easy. Do you have any city trees in your easement? And then they can just type it in, and it might just pop up and say, yes, contact the city. And that way you could verify that. That seems like a relatively low-hanging fruit.
Our website now asks you to contact the city, and we will tell you if the tree is ours or not.
Right.
It's kind of the same thing, but opposite. They contact us, we'll let them know, versus them looking up the tree. But if you click on our webpage, you can contact the municipal arborist or the landscape division, and we can tell you if it's a city tree or not.
And mods to these apps are not as easy as you might think. However, the way Ryan and Eric were talking about it, people like going on their computer or their phone and just checking it out, sometimes just out of curiosity, and just doing it that way rather than, now I've got to call or email and wait for a response kind of a thing. I'm not saying that's possible to do right now. I'm pretty sure it's not an easy thing to do, but that sure would be more ideal.
Well, I'm pretty sure that this discussion is going to continue after we've heard from the Parks and Rec Commission. So, how do we proceed with this? Do we continue?
I can make a motion to continue this to a date uncertain, pending Parks and Recreation Commission weighing in. What's the word I'm looking for? Discussion.
Review.
Report back.
And report back, and then agendize it at a future meeting.
I would support the motion with the amendment that the city attorney explores the requested items for both myself and Councilmember Nakano.
That's fine.
And if there are any restrictions on oak trees, or are there any kind of other protected
I
trees?
just don't have any idea of what kinds of trees are out there, right? And the rules
Right.
can't be
If it's a
applied.
legal restriction, that would be part of my report too.
I second John's motion.
Any further? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 5-0. We continue to a date uncertain. Okay, we'll move to item 2, discussion of and consideration of establishing a city ceremonial recognition policy. Deborah Black?
Mayor, council members, and members of the audience, the policy before you tonight will establish a formalized process to assist staff in responding to the request for recognitions. The documentation before you includes a chart of recognitions that we currently provide and suggestions for new recognitions. Staff is open to hearing and taking your suggestions and ideas for making this a beneficial process for the community. And City Manager Constantine will walk us through the proposed policy.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. In line with what I had mentioned at the last item, consistency is beneficial, especially when it comes to something that's going to go before the council. When a council member wants to bring an agenda item, 2 council members request it, it's discussed at the next meeting, and it potentially is agendized with the work required by staff to prepare that item. But in some cases, somebody can request a proclamation and it just gets on the agenda, even if it was none of the council members that made that recommendation. So there is an inconsistency there that we wanted to make sure we addressed. This policy was to be discussed on February 4th, but the council authorized it coming separately to allow this to be completed and then to have the 2 other items on the September 4th. So what we did was I re-reviewed the last version of this draft that the council saw when we first came before the council, and this was early August, and made some changes to inconsistencies that we had even in this proposed policy. So first, under the definition sections, we reflect 3 different types of recognitions, but generally refer to all of them as recognitions. So a proclamation, a plaque, a certificate would all be considered recognitions in the policy when it's referenced as such. The objective is really to become consistent and to know when we authorize the issuance of such recognitions. And then the assigned responsibility would be the city clerk's responsibility to coordinate and lead the efforts for doing those recognitions, irrespective of whether it's a proclamation at the council or a plaque that's provided for the retirement of a council member or some other certificate that may be given to a business, for example. In the policy, I want to walk through some of I'll go section by section since it's not a very long policy. Under the policy, section 1, when a member of the council would like to make a request on behalf of the entire council, we would follow the same process we do when we agendize an item for discussion. So if I want to do as a council member, a proclamation for the Boy Scouts, a second council member could say, yeah, I agree, and then we would agendize the actual proclamation at the next meeting, as opposed to a discussion of doing a proclamation at some future meeting. So you could, in essence, within a 30-day period, initiate and actually have the proclamation at the council level when the council initiates it. When an organization, business, or individual desires the request for some type of recognition, the city clerk would receive that request, and the city clerk would provide a notification to the council, which would allow the council or a member to decide whether it's worthy for recognition, and therefore make that same request at a council meeting and get concurrence with a second council meeting, and then we would treat it the same then as a council requested recognition. In section 3, there are some regular and reoccurring type of recognitions that we provide every year. You saw the matrix that's in the document itself. What we can do is formally approve, so we know that these are the ones we're going to do every year, in which case they would not require coming back to the council. They could just be put on the agenda or performed as a matter of the fact that we're going to do this every year. Under Section 4, when a club, organization, or agency gives some type of recognition to local individuals or other organizations, or if there's special or regular events that occur, and it's of significant note of pride to the city or our community, we can recognize that under a recognition section on the council agenda at the discretion of the mayor himself or herself, or upon two council members requesting that we make that recognition. So Life Pacific is celebrating their 100-year centennial. It is of specific note and pride that our one university is having this monumental event, and therefore the mayor can deem that as something to come forth to the council for some type of recognition at the council meeting, or two members of the council. In Section 5, since we do a lot of work with specific businesses and recognizing businesses, in this section, if the Chamber of Commerce desires to recognize a grand opening, a reopening, some major achievement of a business, like we did the antique shop of 30 years of service in the downtown core, that the request of the city, the Chamber of Commerce for that type of recognition can just occur without requiring council action to be able to do that recognition. So that request would come into the city clerk's office, and the city clerk would then process that proclamation in that case as if it's coming from the entire city council themselves without first having to come for permission to the city council. Under Section 6, there may be, because a policy can never account for everything, this provision allows that in some limited cases, if something comes up that's not contemplated by the policy, that the mayor can make a decision to do that recognition, and that the city clerk and city manager would just validate that it doesn't fall within any of the other 5 sections, that it could be done on an agenda in accordance with the policy for some unique reason, or if staff drop the ball on a request and we need to do it based on timing, that the mayor can trigger that event without having to come to council. It's just reviewed by staff to make sure it complies with the policy. And then lastly, because there are frequent occasions where individual council members, and especially now when we've moved to districts, want to recognize some significant event of a resident, whatever that may be, this would authorize a city council member to be able to use city letterhead to provide that recognition. So, you know, a 6th grade student accomplishes winning a turkey trot at a school within your geographic boundaries, and you want to recognize that as a council member. You have the ability to say, on behalf of council member or mayor X, we recognize the significant achievement of your child, and to be able to provide that electronically to that family with an unlimited number of times to do that, or hard copy, where you would prepare that as the council member and we would mail that at city expense, but we would limit that to 25, or as otherwise restricted by law, because I know there's a restriction on mailings that have elected officials' names on them going out at taxpayer expense. And that generally is the categories of recognition that we're recommending. So before I turn it back over to the mayor for the discussion of the council, we can discuss this in more detail. We can get direction from the council if the council desires us to come back with more. But if you desire to approve it and there's no issues from the city attorney or staff, then approve it at this meeting.
Chris, before you end the staff report, I think I found a typo that I just want to confirm with you on policy section 6.1. The last line says if a council member wants to request a recognition, they need the support of 2 other council members, but I believe what we want our policy to be is 1 other council member. Is that right?
Correct. I'm sorry, you've seen under 8 section 6.1?
6.1. 6.1.
Yes, it should be 2. Any reference to 3 should be 2.
So the 2 require the support of 1 other council member is how it should read there.
What's the page number at the bottom? 92? Page 90. 6.1. Oh, yes, would require, it would be the last line of number 1, would require the support of 1 other council members. That's the correction.
Well, I don't have any opposition to it.
I would move approval as proposed, unless anyone has any.
I do.
Oh, withdrawn.
So, my view and my strong preference is to have as much flexibility on recognition and proclamations as possible. It's really, I believe, philosophically, for a small city like San Dimas, recognizing community members and not necessarily confined to the 30-day window is what makes a community like ours function. In the cases where I did make a recommendation for a proclamation, Old Town Antiques as well as Zach Jacobs, we found out through the buzz, and there was not enough time. And I wanted Cynthia Williams to be recognized in the, close to when she was having her celebration. If we'd gone through the 30 days, it would have been off. Now, it turns out that she wanted, there were scheduling conflicts and she wanted to be recognized in December. But by putting forward a standard where you have 30 days, there will be a lot of just kind of odd opportunities where you'll see things not be recognized in a more timely way. And so I just wondered if we would consider having some sort of flexible option where it's at the discretion of the mayor or something else where in the cases of that, we can accommodate the schedule without necessarily being handcuffed to these time frames.
That's a good point, and I think that's addressed in the one I mentioned because a policy can't fit every requirement. So the mayor can trigger a recognition, and the evaluation of the city clerk and the city manager would be just that. There's not an
Those cases, though, I thought were more exceptions that don't fall within the policy. So in this case, I guess she would fall, in the case of Old Town Antiques, what would that be?
Old Town Antiques, the Chamber of Commerce can trigger recognizing a business at any time. So in your scenario would be, we identify an individual that's winning the Medal of Honor and being presented next week by the president, but we didn't find out until today.
Yeah.
And there's no way in 30 days we can say, let's recognize them. In that scenario, it would be the mayor, a council member can bring it to the attention of the mayor. The mayor would trigger saying that, of course, this is in keeping with the policy. Okay. And the evaluation staff is doing is just to make sure that, well, no, you actually can do number 2 and meet the requirements that you have. Or you're right, it is in keeping with the policy and there's no other way to make this happen in the time allotted except for to just do it. In which case we would just do the proclamation.
So there's an exception process for all of these. The other thing I would maybe add to this is some consistency in terms of how we present it. I know that the formats have varied quite a bit. They've been printed things and the rest. And in the instance of Zach, we actually had Linko frame it. It was a nice frame, and I thought it really represented something, a good keepsake, for San Dimas. And it wasn't even that much. It was like, I think, $30 or something like that.
50.
Okay, well, I think was that because of a rush? And he gave us a discount or something. But at any rate, if we could think about adding to the policy some sort of a budget so that it's not just a piece of paper, but it is something. And in the case of that instance with Zach, we even put on the back of the frame, framed by a local business in San Dimas, would add some additional meaning to it. But is that something that the council would be entertaining at all, would be open to entertaining as a budget for these types of things to make them look a little nicer?
So if the council's desire is to change the presentation, we can do that, and we're starting the budget process now. So we do have a budget for proclamations, the documents and whatnot. So we just look at what exactly the council wants and we just up the budget for it. What I want to try to, I think the concern that we have is, we could do 10 proclamations a year or we can do 300. And so depending on what we want to do, we just need to know kind of the parameters of what the budget needs to be to accomplish that goal.
I think your concern is that people will abuse it, and I don't think that we'll see any, I just have no concerns that any member of this body will give them out so prolifically that they don't mean anything.
I think what we can do is, because we know we can find out exactly the cost without the discount of what this nicer recognition could be. We work internally to figure out, let's estimate how often we would be looking at a proclamation for a business that doesn't require a frame versus a proclamation for a Major League Baseball player or a Medal of Honor winner from the U.S. Army, for example. And we just work the budget in that fashion. So long as we know that we're not triggering the weekly business recognition proclamations for a business as a framed $50, $60 recognition, I think that's something I would really need your direction if that's the direction we want to go. But maybe we just try it and add more to the budget.
The people that I've requested recognitions for are happy with a piece of paper. It's nice to be in that little blue folder thing, but it's nice to be in color and, with the city's logo and everything. I wanted to ask about 3 cases and see how they fit in, because I just want to make sure. So an individual council member has the 25 per year, which I think is generous and plenty. So say the individual council member gets a request, which has happened, for somebody who has recently passed, who gave service to the city and all that, so they meet a bunch of requirements. And it's like 5 days before the funeral. How would that fit into the policy, and what should happen at that point?
You'd be doing a letter on your behalf as a council member on city letterhead acknowledging that event. You could issue it yourself directly electronically, or prepare it and be ready for mailing, provide it to the city clerk, and we will mail it at city expense if it's within the 25.
And if I wrote out the verbiage, could that be done by the city on the letterhead, or do I have to put it on the letterhead somehow myself?
The way we wrote it here was to limit the administrative burden, because we have no idea how many different if it's electronic, there's an unlimited number. And so what typically happens is, hey, can we do a proclamation for this person? And then the city clerk now has to go research this person, get that information, put it together, and then present it. And so the preference would be that if a council member identifies somebody who's passed away or in their ceremony is 3 days from now, you put together the letter, prepare it, and if you want it mailed or printed out hard copy, we can just print that out at city expense. Otherwise, you can just send that out directly.
Good. Say you have plenty of time, but again, an individual council member gets a request from the family for whatever, it's 90th birthday of somebody or whatever, and the requester says, I want this from the city. I like you, but I really want the mayor's signature to be on this thing. How does that fit into the policy, and what should you do?
So that would be more along the lines of a proclamation, in which case it would be bringing it to council at the meeting to get a second member to say yes, and then at the next meeting we'd be doing the proclamation for the 90th birthday.
Proclamation, or could it be where you just hand carry it to the ceremony or whatever?
If it's just a letter, that can go directly.
Got it. Okay. That's fine. Appreciate that. And the last one is that does not seem to be covered, but recently got a request or had a discussion or conversation with somebody about the dog park. And Carol Smith, who some of you remember, was on the Parks and Recreation Commission, and before that she advocated for the dog park. And honestly, without her, we probably wouldn't have the dog park. So the request was, what kind of thing could we put at the dog park? And it ranged everything, let's name the whole dog park for her, to having a little plaque or a little sign saying, in recognition of Carol Smith's efforts. Where does that kind of, first of all, that's something I would like to have the council consider, but there are things like that happen every now and then too. So where would that fall?
So there's a lot more significance to that type of request, naming of a facility, establishing of effectively a monument that would which would trigger a requirement for maintenance and replacement. I know the example I think we received once was the death of somebody individual, and they wanted to place something at a city park. On its face, a city tree or a rock or something of that nature. It would seemingly, of course, that sounds like a great idea, and we want to recognize that. But then as soon as you recognize that if it's vandalized, removed, or we change something in the park, it may result in us having to now figure out and do something different to continue that recognition. And so we could either define a policy, which I would recommend separate from what we have, since this is more of a normal, ongoing, regular, and have separate policies for those specific items, or to address them one by one, presuming that they're not a frequent occurrence. Like a naming of a building is a very significant activity.
Right. So either way, it's separate from this policy, so that answers my question. Okay. Thanks.
I'm concerned, as I was just thinking about Councilmember Nakano's suggestion regarding the frame, and my experience has been much like Councilmember Ebner's, that people seem to be appreciative of the proclamation and the folder and what have you. I'm concerned when I think, listening to Chris talk about it, I'm concerned about the equity in trying to decide who deserves a frame and who doesn't. You know, I mean, I worry that, you know, trying to make a distinction on that is concerning to me. And I also am concerned with the monetary expense. We were talking about, you know, when you talk about things like this, you know, I know people that yell at me sometimes about things up here, you know, they look at that and go, is that a necessary public expense? Especially when someone may frame something to, you know, match their office, for example, and we may pick the wrong frame or the wrong color or the wrong mat that may not go with what they may like. So those are just my concerns about it. Sure. I don't know that, I mean, $50 a frame, even if it was $300 for frames, I don't know that I'm okay with that personally.
I see your point. There are a couple of points that I would like to raise that may help provide additional context. So the first is that when someone gets an award of that sort, especially if it is framed, there is an incentive to hold it up, and you have some measure of recognition and publicity of the city, especially for someone who's, like in Zach's case, is moving across the country, want him to show off his hometown roots. And so the $50, in my view, is an investment to highlight the good things that are coming out of our city. The other thing, of course, is that it actually came up when we often do ribbon cuttings, where we are at these ribbon cuttings in the chamber. See members of the chamber here, they put forward a really nice proclamation with the frame, and then we, the city, have paper, and it looks a little unequal. And so my thought was, well, the chamber set this nice precedent. Maybe it's something we should consider as well, so it looks more equitable. So those were two things that came to mind when I thought about the frames, if that helps.
Yeah, but I does. My wife's received a thing from the chamber, and in fact, reframed everything to match her office. So, I mean, I do hear you, but I think that, you know, I'm just thinking is in terms of being a good steward of the public funds, and as it relates to trying to decide, you know, I would like to see a kid, you know, getting recognized for, you know, like, for example, you know, our basketball team, for example, and some of these people making CIF playoffs. I'd love to frame all of them, you know, and I don't know, I feel so twisted about, like, the basketball or the baseball player, and I understand the sentiment and where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But I don't respectfully, don't see that any different than recognizing other outstanding citizens in the community.
I think you raised fair points. The other thing I would say is that the frame in this case, because you're framing it locally, it's not, you know, something that you're buying at, say, Target or something of that sort, but it's done by a local small business, does add, even if it may not match the office decor, it adds a nice touch, I think, that may make people consider things differently. But all these points are fair. They're meant for discussion, and we can come to whatever decision we come to. I'm just raising these because I think it's worth thinking about all these points, since, you know, they have been raised previously.
A sheriff's deputy, as just by way of example too, cannot recommend a bail bonds agent to someone arrested. You know, and I think about that we want to support local business, but here the city is giving a frame away by a local business, you know, for all purposes endorsing or supporting that local business, you know, and I worry even how we pick that local business, you know, when we say that's the one we're going to do for the city's, you know, honors. You know, I hear what you're saying. I'm happy with the paper personally.
Well, I was going to just say on that point, I'm not worried about the cost so much, because I think it would be minimal and not that many times. I don't worry about endorsing a business, the local business, because we do that all the time with our various events and have them at the events where they decide to be at them. But the question I had, Eric, was how do you envision picking the various recipients to be a framed or a not framed?
You raise a good point. So I think that would be something we'd want to discuss if we move forward with that, right? Because that is a point where I think would require input from council if council decides to move forward. There's different perspectives on that if there is a frame.
So
the one good thing about the frame store in that example, though, is that Linco is the only framer, local small business framer in the city. So there wouldn't be. In fact, he talks about, I think the next closest one is in like Upland or something like that. So,
so could we adopt the proposed policy and maybe discuss the framing separately? I just, it wouldn't be too hard to do a little modification if.
Right. I just wanted to, John, if you don't mind. Ribbon cuttings. Okay. And now Margie moves over to look at me. Okay. The reality is that we've years ago adopted or had not adopted, it just became an item. Margie Green created a certificate for ribbon cutting. And it's a good document, but as we grow, when you start looking at who's come along presenting these documents, the Board of Supervisors, the state legislature, we're giving a piece of paper and a little folder that we've outgrown. And I would kind of think that we should look at something with a little more color, a little more pictures that say, ribbon cutting certificate or something. The folders that we give out now with proclamations and stuff, make the ribbon cutting things or the businesses that we're going to give out, make it look more like that versus a little bit of 8 by 10 photograph. And I think that I'm not sure exactly how those things are made, and it's not my job, but I just think that we can pick up our game and people are going to notice it. The community is going to notice what we're doing, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an oak frame or anything. Like I said, I went with Eric and Chris to look at the frames and stuff. I'm not sure that's what we want to do, or I wouldn't even be supportive of giving a frame out with everyone, but a nicer certificate. And that's not to mean that Margie, please don't accept that as criticism. It's just, we've outgrown it.
Yeah, it's never been used the way it was designed or meant to be used.
Right.
So it's time to change. It's
And
time to grow.
I just would like to know where that's covered at in this policy.
So let me speak to both the items that came up. First, I agree with you. We've gone to a lot of ribbon cuttings and we see what's presented by the county and the senators or the assemblymen. So my preference is to go to the proclamation and without changing the titling, because we could therefore just have one document. We just change the language. And we do that as a matter of course. It's not a proclamation that has to come to council. It's just a proclamation that we present on behalf of the city and all the city council members for that business. And we could just do that with the chamber providing the language, and we just kind of move with that. On the matter of the framing, I think we already have a mechanism in place that could assist. Anytime a request is made, that it triggers that to council requirement. And so therefore, when I propose doing a proclamation for John Smith, and I like it to be a framed proclamation, we'd get, I think at the frame you can have that conversation, but we could figure that which goes and what doesn't go. It's the instances where the mayor triggers a recognition because the timing is such that you can't do it during a council meeting. I think that would be limited, and therefore I think we just try out how do we get there, and if we see, wow, we're really starting to go overboard with framed recognitions that's impacting the budget, I could just come back and have that conversation with the council again. I don't foresee an issue so long as the council telegraphs we'd like to do frame proclamation for this individual because of the significance of the event, or not a frame, just a proclamation for this individual. And we could adjust if it doesn't work.
I'll just say I agree with the mayor on redesigning the proclamation. Well, maybe a legal format, legal size, as most of the proclamations are, the city seal embossed perhaps in a nice artistic backdrop with everything else, kind of like the county's proclamation. And I guess in plain English, I don't support the frames, period.
Okay.
Mayor, I'd like to share that we do currently have I don't want to use the word formal, but we do have a proclamation format document that was professionally done. And I think the last time I had to purchase them, it's probably been almost 10 years ago. That's how infrequently we use them and why we still have some. But it is in the city's, the blue color, and it's does have the gold foil with the city of San Dimas across the top of it, proclamation written across the top. So we do have a very fancy, a more fancy template document that we used for mostly 90th or 100th birthdays, special retirements, those type of things that we can move over to that being the
ribbon cutting?
For any of our recognitions at this point.
It's good to know. I think that's something that you and Chris and the Parks and Rec people could look into. I just think that it's okay to step up our proclamation. We're welcoming a new business to town. Here lately, we've been welcoming businesses who've now revamped themselves and things like that, so I'm not sure where that all stands, but that would be between the chamber and the city clerk and stuff. But I just think it's time to step up the look.
If I may, if you're okay with the policy, I think I just need some clarity since I'm hearing two differing views. Do you want framed proclamations in any fashion or not is the direction we would need?
Well, I would say that if in the case where we're bringing these up through the normal process, that could be just discussed on a case-by-case basis, and that to me seems like a reasonable compromise at that point. It could be the purpose that no frames are ever awarded, which I'm fine with, but I think that leaving the door open to that discussion is reasonable to me.
The challenge, though, is that when you have that initial council member request and a second council member saying, yes, let's do the proclamation, it isn't an agendized discussion. It ends up being a triggered event for the next time. And so if you say, I want it to be a framed proclamation, and you get a second, the rest of the council can't say, I don't agree with that unless we agendize it, which you can have the conversation and say, I'd like that to be agendized before we decide to go that
I do
route.
think that the frames, if it's agendized, and I think that to me seems, I agree that in the rush cases, that shouldn't be considered for.
So we could go with this policy if the council desires, and the frame discussion could be something that the council has to act on when a proclamation is brought forth.
Yeah, I just am going to say, generally speaking, when I look at the expense as it relates to what it is and what has been done, and even the county, the state, no one's framing them. And so even when we show up and the supervisor, the assembly member, the state senator, they all show up with their legal size, beautiful scroll, or whatever the case may be, and they present it. I understand why, but without digging into the merits on who you select, which is a philosophical issue that I will not compromise on. I view every person equally. If we're going to recognize them from this city, from this dais, then I'm not willing to say one person is more worthy of a frame than another, and therefore I don't support the expense.
I just want to ask John. John, you've been here longer than me. I've been here for a while. I can only remember one framing, and that was the baseball player. I don't know if you can remember any more.
Well, I happened to see Cynthia's proclamation. She had it right inside her door, and then Sam's Christmas tree or Christmas decorations, and both of them were really excited to have it. I think Cynthia had framed hers, or somehow it was nicely presented.
Individual.
So often they do frame them themselves. Because was yours framed originally?
No,
No,
the one that was framed.
it wasn't.
So-
And
No.
to answer your question, as long as I've been doing recognitions, that was the first one that we had done in a frame.
And believe me, it was extremely nice, and I believe Zach appreciated it, and I know his family appreciated it, but I could certainly see how do you get there. And so I think I would be more supportive of us not doing it, but then tomorrow something will come up. and I'll sit there and say, why did I say that? But, all right, everybody acceptable to this? Except for
it almost
Eric?
looked like Eric was going to say something.
Go ahead, Eric.
I hear the consensus of the council, and so I will withdraw a request for consideration for frames.
Okay.
Got it. Okay, so do we need a motion on this?
Yeah, we need the motion redone in a second.
I'll move approval of staff's recommendation noting the correction to 6.1 as proposed.
Second.
And that'll also include the ribbon cutting certificate?
That's something we can operationalize. It doesn't need to be in the policy.
Super. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 5-0. Okay, we'll move on to item 3. This is, hang on just a minute here. It's a public hearing matter. Holy cow. Okay, we're going to be introducing ordinance 1296, the municipal code text amendment, section 10.32.030 of the San Dimas Municipal Code to clarify truck route boundaries. Public Works.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Genevieve Amaro, the Administrative Aide for Public Works Department. This evening will be the first reading and introduction of Ordinance 1296, a municipal code text amendment for Section 10.32.030 of the San Dimas Municipal Code for truck route boundaries. Just to give council a bit of background, since I was here last on December 13th at the meeting, council directed staff to initiate a municipal code text amendment to this section. So this is the proposed revised truck route map, and the major areas in which we would be modifying have been circled in red. So if we go from the top right corner, that's the San Dimas Canyon Road. That section would be excluded from the truck routes. We're proposing that it be excluded from the truck routes because it's a predominantly residential area. Therefore, having that as a designated route, it's leading towards an area that has no destination other than county property. Another area that was also mentioned that we will be excluding, we propose to exclude, is Covina Boulevard. That section there is because Covina Boulevard on the west side of Valley Center, that part is LA County portion, and that portion is not a designated truck route. So we're proposing to exclude our portion that's within city boundaries so that it's consistent when it flows through. The two other areas with the freeways, so for the 210 freeway that was previously mentioned as Route 30 in the language, so we just updated that onto the map to say the 210 freeway. And then the 57 was being referenced as the 210 freeway, so now we're referencing it as correctly as the 57 freeway. Another area in which we are also just clarifying the boundaries is Badillo Street, just clarifying that it goes to Sunflower Avenue to Covina Boulevard, so it wasn't as clear in the language. Another area that we did mention at the last meeting was Puente Street. So Puente Street at the very bottom where it intersects with Villa Verde, the language was just saying Puente Street itself was a truck route, but now we're adding some language for it to say to Villa Verde, that's where it is, since If you go past Villa Verde, that's also residential. So those are the main changes. We do have a little bit of additional cleanup to the text. So it's at staff recommends that City Council open the public hearing to receive public comment and to read by title and introduce Ordinance 1296, a municipal code text amendment to amend chapters 10.32.030 of the San Dimas Municipal Code to clarify the truck route boundaries. If staff, or if the council has any questions.
Questions of staff from the council?
Thank you for the report. One question just on the language, and this would be in the ordinance part of the presentation. It's in both spots, the same question I have in the report and the ordinance. But in the ordinance part, it's on the second page of the ordinance itself, under it's section 1, and it's parentheses M. See where I'm talking?
Can you cite a page number of the big bold?
So it's page 99 of the agenda, and that's page 2 of the ordinance itself. And at the top of that page, section M is San Dimas Canyon Road from Foothill Boulevard, and then it says to the South City Boundary Arrow Highway. And since you had taken out boundary notations in other spots, including that same paragraph, I was wondering if that's supposed to be a strikeout, where it says to the South City Boundary, or should it just be to Arrow Highway? That would be consistent with what the language is being changed to in other sections.
We can look at that and make it consistent. I think it was a miss.
Okay, yeah, I think it's supposed to be a strikeout there. I don't have another question.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll open up the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak to this matter, please come forward. Seeing no mad rush, we'll close the public hearing. Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 1296.
Move approval.
Are we going to have reading, or do we need a reading of that?
No, you're going to have to read it.
Ordinance 1296, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Dimas, County of Los Angeles, California, amending section 10.32.030 of the San Dimas Municipal Code regarding truck route designation.
I move to introduce ordinance 1296.
Second.
Any further questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. Thank you for your report. And then we'll move on to oral communications. Members of the audience, speakers are limited to 3 minutes, or as may be determined by the chair. Anyone wishing to speak to the council at this time? Ms. Levant?
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor and Councilman. I highly appreciate it. I'm Ruth Luvan from 933 Cypress Street. Not to belabor the trees, but I do have some concerns regarding your earlier discussion. One of them had to do with the concept of only maintaining the trees once every 4 years. So if the city arborist in their team is going to come out and maintain the trees every 4 years, and if some trees need to be pruned every year, then it seems to me as if it comes to the actual owner's responsibility to prune that tree and maintain it the other 3 years. Now, let's assume that the owner does not do that. If you do not prune a tree, such as the tree that was shown in that picture, which, by the way, I'm very familiar with because that house sits on the corner of Windsor and Valley Center, which is in District 2, a neighborhood in which I live. If you do not actually prune a weeping willow or a desert willow, it does appear to be one of those, then they die. So they're prone to diseases or other nasty little mites, and eventually they do die because they have not been pruned properly. Now, this may not be that type of tree in particular. Once again, I'm not an arborist, but what I do know is that those trees do have to be pruned. If you were to Google any site on Google Images, just kind of like take a look around, you would see that willows, desert willows, weeping willows, when they are pruned, they often look like the images that were in those pictures. I'm also deeply concerned that of the several images that were shown, every single one of them, with the exception of one, came from the same address. Which, if they all came from the same address of a tree which was pruned, which is also a desert willow, because I've seen this tree before, and if you look at earlier images from this on Google, it seems to me as if this would be a tree which would need pruning. Now, the depth of that pruning, only an arborist would know from that context, but if the owner is not allowed to prune that tree, and the arborist only prunes that tree once every 4 years, is the owner then responsible for the death of that tree? If the tree's branches fall and the tree dies, is the owner then responsible for the death of that tree and the subsequent cleanup of that tree? So at what point are we, the owners, responsible for community trees if we can't take care of them ourselves? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak toward the council at this time? We'll move on to city manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At our next council meeting, or just prior to it, at 5:30, we will be holding town hall. Well, actually, Southern California Edison will be holding a joint town hall where they will be bringing some of their experts, engineering level experts, to talk about the reliability and the outages that the city has experienced over the last several years. We've asked them for data. That data that they provided has been provided. However, we've asked for more detailed data so that we can identify specific, neighborhood X on such and such a date, 125 homes impacted, so that the council can have a better, more informed discussion with Southern California Edison as to why what it appears to be that the city experiences in certain neighborhoods a dramatically higher level of outages than other parts of the city and other communities. So that will be a good opportunity for the public to participate in that discussion. On Saturday, February 4th, we're scheduled to have the council's study session retreat on the board and commission and council handbooks. We will try to provide you a copy of that draft sooner than the 3 days prior to that Saturday, with red line changes where we recommend some changes and maybe a couple of options where you can pick between one versus the other. And the hope is to try to go through that methodically and complete it in the same day. And if for some unforeseen reason we're not able to do so, to at least know exactly what needs to be done prior to it being approved at that following meeting, which would probably be a regular council meeting. In terms of the Gold Line, we received notice from the Gold Line that the closure of the turns allowed at the Bonita Cataract intersection will be extended until February 28th. And so the configuration does not allow turns. First, there's no turn from westbound Bonita to southbound Cataract. And second, no left turn from northbound Cataract onto, I think it's westbound Bonita. And so that's extended, so we should have that for another month and a half. With that, that's the end of my report, Mr. Mayor. I return it back to you.
Thank you. City Attorney?
Mayor and council, to add on to those upcoming meetings, a couple meetings ago, the council requested a study session on the new housing laws that were adopted by the legislature in the last session, and we are planning to have that study session on the first meeting in February before the city council meeting. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Members of the council, discussion and consideration to appoint 2 council members as an ad hoc committee to review a draft community survey of resident satisfaction and city priorities. Anyone wishing to talk to this matter?
I'll nominate Councilmember Weber.
Second.
I'll nominate Councilmember the other Eric.
Second.
I'm seeing a trend here. We seem to be on a lot of ad hoc committees together.
Eric squared.
That's all we needed, Mr. Mayor.
That's all we needed?
Correct.
Man, I feel left out.
You can join us.
I actually left out because in my mind, I thought the perfect combination, and Eric, please do not take this wrong, but I thought Ryan and Eric would be perfect for this.
I enjoy working with all council members, so I'm fine with whomever. But I will say that since Eric was, I believe, this was your initial, I do believe that he should be able to have a more in-depth look at.
Any opposition?
That was my thought exactly.
Okay.
That's good.
All right, we'll move forward with that. Council members' reports on meetings attended at the agency's expense. Anyone? Okay. Councilman Vienna.
Oh, first this time. Wow. Happy New Year. All right.
You should have took that job.
Yeah, right. Well, I just want to say Happy New Year, everybody. It's great to be back after a long holiday since our last meeting. As you can see, there's plenty of fun stuff for the city to dig into. I look forward to the year ahead. I think last year the city had a really good year. We knocked out a lot of things. I think there's a lot of things ahead of us that are going to be a lot of fun. And we have a lot of things to tackle. I look forward to a off year, at least ahead of us, for non-elections for the city, at least until next year, I guess. So hopefully we'll be able to make the sausage, as they speak, this year and really push through some things that I think need to be gotten through. I wanted to give a shout out to the Sheriff's Department. I've heard a lot of great things from the people who, and what I've seen on social media, who completed the Community Academy. So I know I've seen some of our graduates here and have heard nothing but great reviews. I applaud the community members that took the time to not only attend it, but also to be able to take an interest in public safety and really kind of get a different perspective on what our Sheriff's Department does here in the community. So hopefully at some sort of regular interval, every 2 years or every year, whatever, we can do that again if there's interest from the community to do it. I think this is a good time for people to also look into our community emergency response team. If you have not been familiar with the San Dimas Community Emergency Response Team, you should take a moment to become acquainted with it. They are very good at helping you prepare for emergencies. Like you can see in the last few days, we've had some wild rain come down, and I took some time to drive up during both rain events that have passed to look at the downpour up at Horse Thief Canyon Park for, Kirshner always, predicted the 100-year storm. I wanted to see if we hit it yet. So I was looking at the water flowing down off of the hillside there and the erosion. And it is interesting to see those drains actually pour out onto Horse Thief Canyon Road, or whatever that road is that leads up to the park. And it does flood. And so, I think that's a discussion for a later time when we start looking at some other things going on in that area, but there absolutely is a drainage issue up there, both from the equestrian center, also from the hillside down into the park area. And I will say, I know I've caught the city manager driving up there when I was checking out rain events in, I guess, the 4th district or whatever, the north part of town. But it is important, and so I applaud you for doing that. And I also sent an email to Sherry over the holiday on Christmas Eve, I think it was. After I left a family event and it was pouring rain, I drove up there, and actually as I pulled out onto Foothill, saw a city truck on Christmas Eve night with the lights on, checking each one of the storm drains. And then I made a U-turn because I was so fascinated. I'm like, what are they doing? So I was trying to see, I thought maybe power lines are down or something. But no, actually they turned around, and then I thought they might have been following me, but they actually went all the way up and checked the whole drainage area down there on San Dimas Canyon Road, and then they went up San Dimas Canyon Road, checked around Horse Thief Canyon Park. So thank you, and I know I sent you the email, but I wanted to publicly thank you guys. Seeing staff out, people don't always see staff and when they're working. And to see somebody out there on Christmas Eve, out there for the residents, I think was awesome. And even though the city hall might have been closed, it doesn't mean that our people weren't out there working. So shout out to all of you guys that were having people work through the holiday for us. One thing that came up as it relates to the mobile home park earlier that Maddie raised, I would hope, would like staff to do some outreach to the park for those seniors that may be having challenges getting meals. I don't know if they're aware of the Meals on Wheels program that the city has and works with, or other resources that are out there, but if we could get a hold of Maddie and be able to look into whatever linkage we could do, perhaps, with some of those services. You're giving me a look.
Yeah, we'll work through the property manager.
Okay.
They proposed that program.
That would be good. And then I am concerned about the issues that were raised from another resident earlier this evening from Kathy. I would ask staff to do some due diligence in that and maybe work with the new operator to see if they can work and inquire with the resident committee on that. But I think there's a balance that the city has to take with this, to make sure that the new operator is in fact given the opportunity to manage the property on behalf of the city, and those concerns are being heard. So I'd like to at least try to see that the new operator is given the opportunity maybe to look into this.
We were fortunate that we negotiated an agreement where residents have to go to the property manager to report it, and they have 4 days to engage us, but they would drive the evaluation, and we would see the results of what they found.
Good deal. Okay. All right. Well, I just want to make note of that, so hopefully we can follow up on that, or at least make sure that there is some follow through on that behalf. Other than that, I hope everyone is staying dry, watching your properties, watching for the wind. I had the opportunity to drive up to Mammoth a couple weeks ago, and it's always fascinating when we see what we do here with our businesses, and when I go travel places and you look at downtowns and you look at Independence and you look at Bishop and you go, man, how are these places surviving? And then you wonder, you look at our city and you go, my gosh, look at what we've done here and the amenities that we provide to the community. So I'm not knocking those places. They're awesome. I'm just saying that we really have a lot of great things in our community, and I think that's a testament to the stewardship of the council, the engagement of the residents and concerned citizens that have helped San Dimas become what I've always known it to be growing up here in town, and what it will be in the future. So I look forward to working with the council in 2023 to be able to do some great things and tackle some challenges, and staff, keep doing what you're doing, and thank you. Have a good day.
Well, I just wanted to thank the workers from the city and management who were proactive and responsive to the rainfall that's been happening over the past, well, there's been a bunch of storms, but especially the one the past day or two it was the really heavy one, as Ryan was mentioning. And they were out there early in the morning checking drains and whatever they needed to check. And I know there was at least one tree that was down across the street and took care of that. So thanks a lot to the people who worked on that, and of course management for being there to support them. The second thing is I received some complaints over the past couple of weeks about some pruning up in the Villa Verde Ridge Homeowners Association, or that development. And I just was wondering if, I know staff is following our policies and procedures on that, but when we get to a point where staff can tell all the council members, I mean, I've been talking to staff members myself, but I think everybody should know in the end what the staff has done or is going to do, or that kind of thing, so we're all on the same page.
Yeah, the issue has been reported to code enforcement, but code enforcement's process is to process that. There is no report out to council. So if there's a desire, I'd ask council to take action to ask that come back for discussion.
Well, it doesn't have to be a public, an agendized item. I was just thinking of a report in your updates or something like that that would give the whole council the same information about code enforcement's actions.
I can do that, but I'm a little hesitant on the basis that the number of code cases that we get are pretty dramatic. And so is it expectation that we are to report on code cases, certain types of code cases?
Just this one.
Okay, I'd ask that if concurrence from the council on this one, because one of the issues that we're facing in this case this is an internal issue between residents and a homeowners association, and I made it very clear that we're going to follow our consistent internal processes as it pertains to processing permits for tree removals as well as investigating code complaints, and that process does not include a report out to council. So I just want to make sure that
that's fine. I can, and staff has been very willing to talk to me about it, which is fine. And if the other council members, so what you're saying is if the other council members want more information about it, they should just.
No, I'd ask if this is a discussion of interest to the council for everybody to be on the same information, it'd be something that we agendize for that conversation if that's what's desired.
I'll leave it to the other council members to request that because I'm satisfied with the information I'm getting.
I too have received some complaints and I don't really know status, but it would just be good to know the conclusion. So that way I have some context for what the ultimate end result was. I'm sure I'll be asked about it in the future. So if that is a private conversation that I have, that's fine. What I'd want to avoid is not knowing anything, given that a few residents had emailed me.
That's not a problem. My understanding is that you wanted something at the council level for an update. And so if it's just what happens what's the end of conclusion on these, that's something
right.
I can do in an update to council on one of my weekly updates.
Is there any way that what Councilmember Ebner is requesting that could or would either cause the outcome of the processing to change or an appeal or something that would come before council that would otherwise create a situation that we were engaged with a process that could be problematic?
No, this is one of those areas that, as I had said, I think more than a year ago, when council takes interest in an item, whether it's one council member or not, it takes a different level of significance, whether we want it to or not. And so in this case, the engagement we had with staff on what would otherwise be a normal code enforcement issue that's processed changed the way at which they approached the case itself. And so that's the only change that we have. And so providing a report, we put the request in My San Dimas tracks kind of the back and forth between the residents because this was a resident complaint. So we could provide the resolution. That's not a problem. I'm just cognizant of how staff internally start to process things differently. And while I could tell them, don't do this, I do advise them that this is coming from a council member or this is what the issue is. And so it does change how they operate.
I suspect I could guess what it's about, and I don't know, other than what, like, Councilmember Nakano's curious about. I don't want to personally get into every code case, so to speak, in that way, and I think this particular situation, there's a lot of unique factors over time that have played into what's occurring, I think. So I'm not dying to hear about it.
This is, you remember that case up in, I forget, the Sierra Vista, perhaps, the street where they had the gaming trailer or something like that was parked in front of the house, and the resident across the street complained about it. Numerous council members complained about it, complained, and the city took some action, but there was a little bit of back and forth and trying to figure out what the best solution was. The council was kept apprised of that in several communications from the city manager. I don't remember if that ever came to the council level as an agendized item. I don't think it did.
I think we changed an ordinance behind that.
Yes, it did. There was an ordinance change, and not that specific issue, but it's part of it. There's still ongoing issues in that neighborhood about a variety of issues.
Well, is that before we changed the ordinance, and maybe this would lead to some change in the ordinance. Not foreseeing that. But I just was thinking about getting an update on, as Councilmember Nakano said, what the resolution is.
If it was something that's occurring that I can just put in my update, that's not a problem in terms of what the conclusion of the case
exactly
was.
That's fine. I just don't want a resident saying what happened and not being able to say, I have no idea, right? So that's my main interest, is being able to say, okay, I know what happened. It's resolved, it's closed, and then we move on.
That's all on that one. The third thing, I do have a request for a future agenda item, and I'd like to actually have a preliminary discussion, or start the discussion at our next meeting. This is involving black walnut trees, they're a native species, they're threatened, and we have some in San Dimas. And I'd like to have an agendized item to discuss whether we want to have any kind of special protection, not specific direction, but it's basically to ask for a report from staff at some point in the future with all the information we would need to actually make some decisions. But I'd like to get that discussion. So right now, I just need a second person to get it on the agenda, but I don't want to give a lot of direction right now about what we're intending to do. I'd like that to come at a meeting where everybody talks about it, an actual agendized item.
And I think that's the intent of the policy of the council, that somebody can introduce it and a second member could say, I agree. At the next meeting, it would not have research and information. It would be just the basics to allow you to facilitate the conversation. And then based on that conversation, you can give direction to staff how you want to proceed.
Yes, and that's exactly what it is. And it's specifically to black walnut trees. It's not to do with code enforcement or anything else. It's just black walnut trees and what their needs and status is and what we should do.
Anybody else wishing to support John's?
So it's just a discussion to whether or not we should protect certain trees?
Well, as Chris said, we can't discuss it now. So it's right. I don't want to give a whole bunch of arguments about anything or research or anything like that. And at the next meeting, it's just, do we want staff to research? So next meeting would be, do we want, and at that point, you probably want to give reasons why we would want staff to do such a thing.
Next meeting is just simply, are we interested?
Are we interested to get something back that would, potentially protect black walnut trees?
Just out of curiosity, at what junction, I foresee this conversation being one of those ones that we kick down to the Parks and Rec Commission at some point. I don't know at what point we may want to do that. If we wanted to, before we have the discussion at the council level, have the Parks and Rec Commission touch it first.
I think the council should at least kick it off to see if we're even interested, and maybe we want to send it to the Parks and Recreation, because maybe there's not enough people that want the discussion in the first place. You know what I'm saying?
I was thinking we could do a proclamation and then frame it.
Sold. Yeah.
I'm glad
so that's what
support frames.
Frames are trees, just so we're all clear.
Frames out of some of those black walnut tree limbs that are.
I see no harm in discussion, so I can second that.
Okay. Thanks. And that's all.
Sure. I just want to wish everybody a happy 2023. I hope this year brings you good tidings, good health, good fortune, good luck. And I hope it's a good one for everybody, considering all the challenges of the previous years. And then, given that we now have a proclamation policy in place, I would like to request that we recognize a resident here in San Dimas who I believe has achieved one of those lifetime goals. She's been, her name is Amy Wayne Scott. She's been a resident of San Dimas for a number of years. She recently was the president overseeing the Rose Parade. So for someone from our town to have volunteered with the Rose Parade organization and to have become the president of it, overseeing the organization, especially given that I think it was 2 years ago it was canceled. Last year it was a little bit scaled back, and this year was back to full return. That to me seems like something worthy that we would want to honor this resident with.
She's a resident of District 2?
She is, yeah.
I'll definitely second that. Yeah, I seconded that, so. I'll be the second. The proclamation for Amy.
That it?
That's it.
All right. Well, I'm going to keep it short and just say I hope everybody had a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, and I wish everybody a very safe and prosperous 2023. And like Ryan said, I think we've got a lot of work ahead of us, and we'll get there. We'll do the work. It may not be fun at times. There'll probably be some late meetings, but we've survived it before. I'm sure we'll survive it again and look forward to working with everybody. And just be careful out on the roads out there with all the rain that we're getting. It has been a demolition derby on the freeways for my commute, so just everybody stay safe. That's it.
Having just moved on through this... I'm done. Having gone through the proclamation process and the issues that we talk about, certificates and stuff like that, there is a process right now that as we progress through this, we do have schools that have certain classes and certain things, and we give certificates to football teams and soccer teams, and we also have schools that don't have those type of activities. They have other activities. And I just would like to acknowledge the fact that our very own Chaparral school here, Ed Jones up next to the school district, those kids actually, from what I understand, make one hell of a pot of chili. And they ended up winning a big chili cook-off, and I think that we all should acknowledge the fact that they may not have a football team and they may not have a soccer team, but they got some cooks. And so if you have an opportunity to mention it to the principal, Christine Black, that you acknowledge the fact that they're doing things up there, and it's pretty neat.
Mayor, if you'd like to proclaim that the best chili in town, I'll support your request for proclamation.
It would be very difficult for me to do that, but I'll call them and see if they want to make a pot.
There you go.
But I do think that it was brought up to me that there are different schools, different activities, and I believe that our esteemed city manager is talking with the superintendent of schools about coming up with a program or a process to figure out what the district believes that we should be acknowledging. And it isn't just all sports. Believe me, I enjoy going to those things, but there are kids that are, working very hard at, extracurricular activities, and I think that's pretty neat. Chris, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, and this would be great if I brought it up during the recognition policy. However, the discussion was centered around how do we recognize school-related activities, and we identify them and bring them forth, individual council members. However, it increases the risk that we are recognizing one activity and not recognizing another, and for students that may know something was recognized by the council, but another may give a false perception that we don't value or care about them equally. And so I've inquired with the district that at times when activities or accomplishments occur, to have them help identify and bring forth what those items are that could be recognized by proclamation of the city council, provide them a template of the proclamation, have them fill out the proclamation, and it'd be as simple as providing it for us to consider and take forth on their behalf and on behalf of the city. That way we hopefully don't miss something that should be recognized.
All right. Having nothing further, I hope everyone had a safe and great New Year's. Do want to acknowledge the fact that just like everyone else up here has done, the staff's done a great job through the storm. I understand that this morning we had a tree that fell up in Villa Verde that blocked the roadway, and you guys were up there very bright and early. I know that because the city manager send me a text very bright and early. But thank you guys, and thank your staff. I also went up to Horse Thief Canyon and took a look around up there, but all I was looking at was water. And so I don't know much about all of that, but I did up there. Chris and I had an opportunity to go up and look around and things like that. So, but I did hear that other council members had been up there, so obviously staff noticed that other people had been up there, which is good. It goes to show they're talking to their bosses. So, thanks a lot. At this point, does anybody else have anything else they want to say? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion for to adjourn. See you guys in 2 weeks. Or, no, is it 2 weeks from now? No.